Hello, and welcome to the Rehydrate interview series, a forum where we discuss Liu Cixin's Remembrance of Earth's Past series. In each episode, I will be speaking with a guest about their thoughts and experiences on reading the series. Spoiler warning for listeners, this episode will contain spoilers for all of the Three-Body Problem, The Dark Forest, Death's End, and any other media that we happen to discuss. Today, I'm joined by Frank. Hi, Frank.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us. Frank is a person that who reached out to our podcast and had some, pretty extensive research and experiences with the Three-Body Problem. So I thought it'd be very interesting to speak to him. So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, Dan. I'm a university student. First read the series in the summer of 2018, recommended by a family friend. I first read the series in Mandarin, completely fell in love with it. Before the summer's end, I read it a couple of times and went on to read Liu Cixin's other novels as well, Ball Lightning and Supernova Era, and didn't read the English version until 2020, but finished those as well. I've never read any sci-fi before, but this definitely held my interest, and I'm now reading Arthur Clarke's Odyssey series.
Oh, nice.
And Arthur Clarke, of course, is Liu Cixin's favorite sci-fi writer, I should say.
Yeah. So how did you find the series? I mean, you said you read it in Mandarin, so like I get the impression it's like a lot more popular in China than it is in the U.S. I mean, U.S. it has like pretty niche market, right? Like you have a really intense fan base, but it seems to be really prevalent in China. Is that the case?
I think so. A family member recommended it to me, so I had nothing to do in the summer, so I went ahead and read it.
Okay.
Mm.
Did you read like an actual book, or did you like use an ebook, or did you audiobook, or like how do you generally read these series?
I always prefer an actual book, no matter what I read.
Okay.
So, and it's the reason I was able to, I guess, get extensive knowledge in the series is because after I would say, have lunch or dinner, I would pick it up and just flip to a random page and read for about 20 pages. After you do that enough times, you really start to connect the dots together and get the things that you missed the first time you went through. You cannot really do that with an ebook because you have to, it just doesn't feel the same way if you want to start at a random spot.
Yeah, that's true. I think the only thing I prefer about ebooks is that it's easier to make notes on it. So especially like as I'm doing this podcast, like I'll like highlight sections and make notes on it. So you could do that in a book, right? But then you're kind of reading the book. Yeah. So that's the only I think benefit of and ebooks are also very searchable. If I'm looking for a particular term, I can just search
that
through
is
real quick.
true indeed. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's best to have a copy of both, and then
yeah. Yeah, that's what I have. I have the copies of all three books for ebook and like the physical copies too. So yeah, it's like I can kind of do both.
Mm-hmm.
And I also the first time I actually quote unquote read Three-Body Problem, I actually did it as an audiobook because I didn't know anything about the series, and I had heard about it as as like a recommendation of hard sci-fi, and I'm a big podcast listener, so I listened to it as like I did a podcast. But I think I got a lot more out of it once I actually read the book, because you can kind of tune in and out as you're listening to an audiobook. With a book, you're like reading it, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. So I guess of the three books of the series, which one is your favorite?
The third one.
Third one? Yeah, me too.
The third one. The third one is the most ambitious and the most the grandest in scale and scope.
Yeah,
ambitious because not only because it aims to give an ultimate picture of the universe, but also in the way it was written. For example, you would recall that there is an analysis of a literature within the literature, the fairy tale of Yun Tianming.
Yeah.
That's ambitious.
That's my favorite part. That's my favorite part of the whole series was the fairy tales.
Yeah, Yeah, indeed. And of course, I think the third book is the grandest in scale, both in the sense of space and time. It also has I think, the best chapter out of the series, which is the Singer chapter.
Yeah, yeah.
Every time I read it, I sometimes still get goosebumps.
Yeah, yeah. I think all the chapters where they give the perspectives of either the Tresolarians or the Singer chapter, like I love all those chapters. Like just seeing like, and the way he kind of has like a little bit different, like how he talks about time a little bit differently. Like it's like grains of sand or
Yep.
like the light minutes or whatever it talks
Structural
about. Right?
yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that struck me the first time I read it was especially in like the first book and when they start introducing Project Sophon, it was really confusing to me, and I had to reread it a couple times to like understand what was because like they dump a lot of information on you, right? Like a lot of like
Hmm.
dimensionality and like a lot of high-minded concepts. I
Hmm.
guess what was your experience reading those chapters?
Well, I think I'm glad to say that I think I got them the first time.
Uh,
I had an interest in my earlier years in theoretical physics.
hmm,
There's a nice Easter egg about the Sophon construction when they said that the microparticle is stored in 11 dimensions, and that's I think that's paying homage to string theory, at least
yeah,
a branch of string theory which is called the M theory. So the M theory aims to kind of encapsulate all the well not all encapsulate the major branches of other string theories, and M theory says that there are 11 dimensions, one time and 10 spatial, in our universe. So the construction of Sophon was definitely fun to read. The human computer
yeah,
pretty much got that time. I didn't experience any of, I might have missed some details, but I got the gist of it the first time round.
yeah.
Um, I also finished it really quickly. The, the I think I finished the entire series in about a week. I had nothing better to do, so.
Oh, a week, really? Wow. It took me like a while. Yeah, I think especially the second book. I feel like the second book kind of drags in the beginning a bit. You know, like the first half before when Logi is still in the common era or the crisis era.
Mhm.
Um, it kind of, I mean, all the concepts are really interesting. I think until they get to the wall facer part, it's like they're introducing all these characters and like it's confusing. So I felt that part a little dragged a little bit, but then it really picks up at the. I think especially like when he goes to the droplet attack time, like that part,
Yeah,
everything just like ratchets up and it's like super interesting after that.
blows up literally.
Yeah.
Um, the slow part, the setup part that you mentioned, I think it's more enjoyable if you read it as a commentary instead of, part of the plot. So
Yeah.
with, the three men, Lao Zhang, Lao Yang, and Bao Miao, they were Beijingers who try to figure out what to do.
Right.
And I think what the author is doing here is simply giving commentary on human response and human nature in the face of a major crisis. And afterwards, Luo Zi's constructed imaginary lover, that's commentary on the nature of love.
Hmm.
There's a very potent quote from a psychologist in the book that says, when someone loves a person, it is not the actual person that they love. It's rather an ideal that they use a template to base it on. But some people, like Luo Zi, don't need a template. They just construct it out of thin air. So that's again commentary, and that's the sort of thing I would miss the first time I read it because it has no significance to the plot.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think. I think the Dark Forest especially like is better on a reread, because like yeah, when you're first reading it, you're like you just come out of the events of the three body problem, right? You're looking for like
Hmm.
continuation of that, and
Yeah.
but like yeah, like you said, like there's a lot of commentary on not only like love, but also I think like the social uh, response to such uh, a big crisis, right? Like
Hmm.
the whole world like has to change their thinking about like how their situation is in the universe, and like the fact that the Trisolarians are not only coming but like omnipresent and listening to everything. And then like the how they set up the wall facer project, all that stuff is like I think much more interesting on a second read. But the first time it's like, all right, well, what's happening here? you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have? I mean, I guess what are the big favorite moments from the series for you? Like what things like as you think back on the series, like what are the big things that stick out to you?
The three body problem game.
Yeah,
The reason I mention that is because it uses the best part I like about it is it uses these historical figures from all eras and regions and try to give them a personality in the game that you can somehow relate to the actual historical figures.
yeah, yeah. So
And
because
yeah.
I mean, was the first part of the game where they interact with like the Chinese historical figures? Like I had no frame of
Mhm.
reference of those. So like did that resonate more with you?
Yes, it was. I wouldn't claim to be an expert on Chinese philosophy, but I at least I knew who they are, and somehow it was a convincing construction of the personalities in the game.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I caught on reread that I didn't catch the first time is like as soon as he changed his username from Hiron to Copernicus, like the entire game
Hmm.
changed like the frame of reference. And I just didn't catch that the first time for some reason. And I think it's because like they're saying, because he's you have a more Western username now, so we're gonna give you Newton and Einstein and all the all the more Western constructions. I think that was interesting.
Yeah, that is definitely interesting, and the whole process of discovering the nature of the three body world is it was quite a revelation for the readers.
I think one thing that still is confusing to me, even after reading it a couple times, I think I've read it 3 times now, is the nature of like player characters versus non-player characters. Like it seems like more of a single player experience, but there's definitely other people in the game. I don't know if there's like other players or those are admins trying to guide people into directions. So I guess did you have any thoughts about that?
Unfortunately, not. It's not a. It's definitely a good, a valid question. I don't have a good answer to it. I don't think it really matters.
Yeah. Yeah, because like I think as I think about it, like initially, like oh yeah, it's a big MMORPG, right? Like other people are in the game, they're playing, some historical figure and just interacting with other
Mm,
people. But then like
mm.
when they go to the meetups and they talk about oh this person saw Civilization 200 whatever, and I'm only on Civilization 180 something, and so I mean I guess ultimately like the game that's not the point of the game. The point of the game is to recruit people into the UTO, right?
Yeah,
Um, but just the nature of yeah like who's a real person who's not because like one time he mentions like I guess one of the characters made like a very like Sichuan specific comment about like the left right thing when they talk about the computer
yeah,
thing, and so
yeah.
like oh it must be a real person. So yeah.
I mean, if you want to get technical, I can imagine a possibility where where it is indeed a single player experience, but the server will record everything that a person does and then use this recording to construct the other players when another player signs on.
Yeah,
So,
it could be.
so it could be a single player experience for everyone. They're not interacting with other players in real time, but rather interacting with recorded players from other parts of the world.
Interesting. Yeah, or yeah, since people have progressed like higher, like maybe like they yeah like in Mario Kart when you raise a ghost, right? So something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I just thought of this because I play a racing game as well, and they use this technology.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Oh, sorry, 1 second. My computer went to sleep. Um, so I guess there's a lot of characters that are introduced in the series. Like, who are some of your favorites? And I guess who are, and then in the converse, like, who are some of your least favorites?
My favorites, 大使,
Yeah,
the police officer, 逻辑, and then Thomas Wade. So you'll notice these are from the three different books, pretty
yeah, yeah. Do you have any least favorite characters?
much. Not really. I wouldn't. No, not really.
I see a lot of like negative comments around Chung Xin from the third book, but I don't get it. Like, I always liked her character. Like, I don't know. Like, uh she always seemed really interesting to me. Like, she's like very very pure, very like she has like good instincts. Like, that gets us into trouble. But I guess there's like debate if she's actually the one that caused all the problems. But in the more immediate sense, she did because she didn't press the button, right? But
Mhm.
that probably would have happened anyway eventually. But I don't know. Like, do you have any thoughts around her?
My feelings towards her are ambivalent. I think the way I think about it is, it's a story and she was constructed by the author to advance the plot.
Hmm. I,
But the character herself, I think it's just a matter of this is the wrong word for this, but it's a matter of fate,
yeah.
if it weren't her, it would be someone else. The
Right.
author is trying to express something inherent in human nature. And the argument here, I think, is that human nature as it is today is not suitable for survival in space.
Right. Right. Yeah, she just
So
happens to be the
yeah.
one that takes over the button, right? And like, but yeah, I think you're right that yeah, she's kind of representing all of humanity, and like and it starts way back, with like the original message going out into space and how naive we are, right? It's like, hey, come visit us.
Mhm.
We're you're humans. We're cool. But it's all let's all like share knowledge. But like, that's not the nature of the universe, right? And so yeah, the Chinching being the person she is kind of continues that nature.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Dasher as being one of your favorite characters. Like, on our podcast, we talked about that a lot too. And yeah, we can't quite get a sense of like why he's our favorite character, but is it like just like such to me, like he's just like he's kind of a stereotype in a way, but that's kind of interesting that he's a stereotype. He's just like this
Mhm.
hard-boiled cop who like just speaks truth to power. Um, so I guess, like, why do you consider him to be one of your favorite characters?
He's just fun to read.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no there's no BS with him. No,
Right.
he's a no nonsense character. And it
Yeah.
also helps that he managed to save the life of Lord Z quite a few times in the second book.
Right, right. Yeah, that's what I was telling some of my other co-hosts on the podcast. Like, just wait, like, especially in Dark Forest, like when he's like when Doji is like in constant trouble, he's like pushing him out of the way of
Yeah,
the hole or
yeah.
whatever, and like yeah,
And also the first book, he was the one who came up with I think in fairness brilliant plan
yeah,
to
yeah,
destroy the ship.
right, right. Yeah, it seemed kind of weird that he was the one to come up with the plan, but they kind of I think they explained it well enough. Like, he had seen something like similar in the past, and then like he's the kind of person who like doesn't think like a military strategy or a scientific strategy like the way the other people are. So
Mm,
yeah.
yeah.
How about Yewen Jie? Like, how do you feel about her? I feel like she is like the most fully formed character of the whole series, and so that I think she might be my favorite character of the whole series, just because of like the amount of backstory that's given to her, as opposed to some of the other ones. I mean, I guess Loji would be the second,
Yeah.
in terms of like fully formed characters, but I think Yewen Jie, of like all the characters, have the most fully formed backstory.
Yeah, in terms of development, there's no contest. She's probably the most developed character. Again, I don't, there's no harsh feeling towards the character. I think it was a convincing construction. She, if you believe in fate, then she just fulfills her fate, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, she did invite over the aliens, which caused a lot of trouble, but that's just how things go. And I think this is slightly on a tangent, but in the first book, after the world learns of what happened, there was no retribution towards, at least not in the book, there was no retribution. There was nothing about retributions against China,
Hmm.
nor there is in the second book. So the world attitude in Liu's writing was, okay, we have a problem, let's get on with it and stop, wasting time.
Right, right.
And I guess that's the attitude you can also take with because what happened already happened.
I think they even mentioned at one point, like if she hadn't done it, like someone else would have done it too. And you know, the same with like the listener too. You know, I think that, and I think we talked about that earlier too. Like these things are just going to happen. Like it happened to do Wenji at that time, right? But it would eventually happen in the the cosmic scale of the universe, right? Like we would have, someone would have found out about a universe, and this would have happened. It just happened to be the person at that time.
I mean, you could think of it as if this if this message from Earth was not sent during the Cultural Revolution, it could have been sent, let's say, in 2010,
Right,
and it wouldn't make a whole lot of difference if you think about it,
right, right,
in terms of human technology and whatnot, and in global politics.
right, right. And so I know you'd mentioned that you read the book in Chinese and also in English. Like, I guess what are
Mhm.
some of the big differences that you found by those two different experiences? And I think especially what I'm interested in is the tone of the first and third books versus the second book, since they were translated by different people in English. And I felt like personally reading the second book, it felt much different, much colder, much um, it didn't have as much warmth as Ken Leo's translation. I felt, and like I think that's why maybe in the beginning it dragged a little bit, but because like obviously the books are all by Liu Cixin in Chinese, like they probably have the
Mhm.
same style, right? So I guess what are your experiences with the language differences?
So there are two questions there. One is what are the differences between the two languages, two versions in two languages. The other is the difference between the English translations. So I answer the first one first. The the first the first thing I'll say is that the translations are faithful. There were, especially in the first and third book,
Hmm.
there were no omissions. There were the meanings, the gist of the ideas are conveyed in an accurate way. There's there are some discrepancies in the second book, which I'll get to later on. But in terms of accuracy of translation, it is quite accurate. Some discrepancies include the order of narration in the first book. So the first book, the English version, starts with the Cultural Revolution in 1966, and then after a few chapters about that, it moves to present day about Wang Miao. So in the Chinese version that I read, it wasn't the case. It
Hmm.
started out with the present day when Wang Miao gets the visits from the army officers. And after a
Oh,
few
really?
chapters in the
Interesting.
present day, the game of pool, right? So after a few
Hmm.
chapters about that, the, then it switches to the cultural revolution. So that's what happens in the Chinese version.
Hmm.
I'm not sure why the decision was taken to switch the order of narration in the English version. Although I should mention that the first body problem, the first book, it also went through different editions in China, and I believe that even the later edition in Chinese had the revised order of narration, which started out in the Cultural Revolution.
Oh, interesting.
Overall, the content is the same; it's just the order.
Hmm.
But for completeness, I'll just point out that discrepancy. Another source of discrepancy, and this is actual content discrepancy, happens in the second book. And this, again, is insignificant to the plot, but it is not it, but I don't think it's a minor discrepancy either. So this discrepancy is regarding the Warfacer plan by Frederick Tyler,
Mm-hmm.
and the English version changes his plan from original. The English version's plan has something to do with water and a mosquito fleet, whereas the original version had something to do with ball lightning. Now,
Oh.
I I think there is a good reason why Joe Martinson did what he did. Joe Martinson is a translator, so the original plan in the Chinese version would have, I think, given away a pretty big twist in Liu Cixin's Ball Lightning novel. Ball
Hmm.
Lightning is a prequel to the Three Body series problem. It's a very loose prequel, but the technology of Ball Lightning is mentioned, in fact, twice in the series. Once in passing during a discussion in the first book. I don't know if you noticed it, and the
Yeah,
second
I
time.
remember that. Like when they're coming up with the Operation Kajung plans, like they're like one of the guys like, "How about his ball lightning?" I'm like, ah, it won't work.
Yeah, the thing is, Liu Cixin's Ball Lightning has almost a mystic approach.
Hmm.
It is definitely not the Ball Lightning we know in our real world, and so the original Frederick Tyler plan in the second book gives away arguably the biggest twist in Ball Lightning, and so they
Okay.
revised it. The revised plan is not very good. I don't think it is very convincing, and I think it gave less credit to Tyler as than he deserves.
Hmm.
Because it just seems a little you know ad hoc and not very well thought out. But that's what the feeling I got when I read the English version. The original version is slightly better.
Hmm. Interesting.
So yeah, so that's the discrepancy between Chinese and English versions. Now, regarding the difference between the English translations, which is the second part of your question, I do think that the second book's translation is a little drier,
Yeah.
and it also has less footnotes
Yeah.
than
That's
the
true.
first and third. Maybe because there were not a lot of Chinese culture in the second book in the first place.
Hmm.
But I've caught a few omissions which could have used a footnote. For example, at the very beginning of the book, right after the prologue, the ship was being built in a shipyard, and the name of the ship was Tang.
Hmm.
Um, Tang is the name of, I mean, you wouldn't catch this in English because it would just spell out Tang. But in Chinese, it's quite obvious that they named it after the Tang Dynasty in
Hmm.
ancient China, which is probably the most prosperous dynasty in imperial times. And again, there's another mention in passing of a ship's name of Zhenghe, which there were no footnote. Zhenghe is a mariner who sailed from China to, I believe, Eastern Africa in the Ming Dynasty and regarded as a pioneer figure in China.
Hmm. Yeah, that stuff is yeah, that's it. Yeah, there aren't that many footnotes. But yeah, I didn't think about that stuff. That's all. Yeah, I figured there's a lot of like Chinese cultural things like that around, among the whole series, right? That like
Mm-hmm.
as a only English speaker, like I wouldn't catch.
Yeah, and these little Easter eggs, and I'm actually reading through the ebook of the Dark Forest and making notes as I go.
Hmm.
So maybe someday I'll just compile it and post it on Reddit.
Yeah, definitely. I think all that stuff is like yeah, super interesting to me. And I think I think it's gonna be especially interesting to people, not only book readers, but like now they're producing the TV show in both China and the U.S. Um, so like I think there'll be a lot more interest, when that series comes out, if it's as popular as I think we all kind of hope it in good as it's going to be. So I guess do you have thoughts around the I guess not only the whole like three body universe they're trying to construct.
You mean the TV series?
Yeah, the TV because like it seems like they're making like in China, they're making a lot more because I saw other people posting, like the behind the scenes footage of the new series there. But then, yeah, also the Benioff and Weiss series in the U.S.
Yeah, so I'm not very familiar with the TV series development, unfortunately. I know Dan and Dave are in charge of the Netflix adaptation.
Yeah,
And I've watched all of Game of Thrones. I've read all the books as well. I think they did a good job with Game of Thrones, at least from seasons I think 1 to 6.
yeah,
Um, but I haven't followed up on the three body problem development because that's just me. When I've read the books, I just don't pay attention to the film adaptation anymore.
hmm,
The one thing I'll say though is I just don't know how they're going to tackle the Cultural Revolution part of the book.
right, right,
Um, I should also point out, and this is again on a tangent, that the writing about the Cultural Revolution in China is not as taboo as you think.
really,
This book was the Three Body Problem was published 2004, I think,
hmm,
and it's definitely not the only one. There are other works that writes about the Cultural Revolution. There are novels out there by Chinese authors who depicts the Cultural Revolution as inherently a bad thing, a terrible, terrible period of history that set back Chinese development by, I think the consensus is 10 years.
hmm,
So it's been written about before, but the caveat, and you can go read it in the bookstore. The caveat is I don't think any of them made it to the screen. That's just
hmm.
as far as I know. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that was surprising to me that they opened the book that way, and then I I don't know that much about the Chinese history and everything. I mean, I know a little bit, but yeah, it was surprising to me that he was so open about it, and I thought it was more of a taboo subject. I guess because like I think more in more modern times, like how the Chinese government really seems to crack down on information, especially on the internet with like Tiananmen Square and that kind of thing. Um,
Mm,
so I assumed that the Cultural Revolution was a similar subject where they try to crack down on information, and by having such a popular book, kind of it being like center stage of like this is the kickoff event that makes all these things happen, right?
hmm
That was surprising to me. But I think since like you're saying, and I've talked to other people about it too, and like yeah, like Chinese government pretty much admits that it was a bad period in history, and like they've made reparations to kind of to make up for it, and they've kind of readjusted their policy.
Yeah.
So, are there any other books that that you're looking at reading, or any series that you are interested in? Like, and you're saying that the Arthur C. Clarke stories, like you're interested. Any other series that you would be interested in reading, or because of I guess like since the Remembrance of Earth Past series like piqued your interest in sci-fi, right? So like any other stuff that you're following or interested in reading?
I just downloaded a book called Anathem by Neil Stephenson last night.
Hmm.
I think I'm going to read that sometime. Although I wouldn't say that sci-fi is top of my list in terms of genres. I have other philosophical books that I would like to get through too.
Hmm.
So one of them, if you like, if you don't want to know this sort of thing, one of them is called Language, Truth, and Logic by A.J. Ayer. So he was under the influence of Bertrand Russell and Wittgenstein.
Hmm.
I'm just saying this out in case you know who they are.
I
but
don't, but
yeah, so I I mostly read philosophy these days and some history from time to time.
okay. Is that what you're studying in school?
Oh no, I study mathematics in school.
Oh, okay, interesting. So did your background in mathematics help? I mean, I guess you said you also did physics, so and that made you understand the the Project Sophon stuff easier. Did your background in math play any part in your understanding of sort of the concepts that were established?
No, I don't think so. There is not very much math in this book.
Yeah.
Mostly it's applied sciences, I would say,
Yeah.
and surprisingly, a lot of sociology as well.
Right.
None of
Right.
them are my expertise. I happen to be lucky enough to have read enough popular science before embarking on this book. I think my favorite popular science book was 1, 2, 3 Infinity by George Gamow.
Hmm.
It first introduced me to a variety of exciting subjects in science, and later on, I became aware of people like Brian Greene and I believe other popular science writers. So I dabble in these things.
Yeah, I thought one of the cool things about this series was that Liu Cixin, like he was able to kind of dive into a whole bunch of like scientific areas, and like it seemed like speak pretty authoritative about it. Like he speaks about physics and applied science and even computer science. I'm a software engineer myself, so like that part kind of resonated with me, like the human computer part. So like I studied that kind of stuff in school. And
Mhm.
so like, and he was able to speak pretty authoritatively about that. And I think you're right about the sociality part, especially in Dark Forest, where you know how the society reacts to the incoming Trisolarian invasion. Um, it, and it didn't seem like he was just like making it up. He seemed like he like really well researched, really well informed, and had good ideas about like all this stuff, and it's all plausible. Like obviously there's some creative liberty there. um,
Mhm.
and I think even the dimensionality stuff like that is a really hard concept to kind of get your head around, but you seem to talk about it pretty well. Like it's hard to like write down and explain what you're talking about. I would say like the chapter when they encounter like the four-dimensional pockets was pretty confusing, but I think he did a pretty good job about saying like how you can see cross sections of people and that kind of thing.
It's impossible to visualize,
Yeah.
and you know what they say. The only way to talk about higher dimensions is through mathematics. But I think
Mm,
Liu has offered a way to somehow give you the gist of it in natural language. That was really cool. So, and the style of speaking about multiple scientific discipline with an authoritative voice, that is almost an exact inheritance of Arthur Clarke's style.
mm,
The just exposition of every detail of possibly every device, every technology in the book, which
mm,
is why I think this book, another appealing aspect of especially the Dark Forest and Death's End, it offers an optimistic view of the future and where technology can take us.
mm,
And that was very I was filled with optimism after I finished. I envy the future which is described I envy the future with abundant energy,
yeah.
with advanced healthcare, with a person being able to live 200 years. So I really like that part.
Yeah, even with the sofa unlock, like humans are able to progress like pretty significantly, and
Yeah,
not in obviously like theoretical aspects, but like yeah, just like practical technology, like you're saying, like the medical technology,
yeah.
like the screens everywhere, like they're able to to really progress. So yeah, the and the pre droplet attack world, the team seemed really great, and they also thought it was great. um,
And also afterwards, after the Sophon lock was lifted, they constructed the circumsolar particle accelerator,
right.
which is to me arguably the most exciting of all, because you can now construct antimatter, which is another source of clean energy, right?
Right.
And engineer a mini black hole and study it. I mean,
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, I'm excited
uh,
about the future. I'm optimistic.
Yeah, same. So when you read the three body problem for the first time, I guess like I think they kind of I feel like the especially the three body problem is kind of uneven in their storytelling. Like he there's a lot of mystery in the beginning, and it's probably intentional, right? Because it really pays off at the end. But I think the downside to that is that at the very end there's a lot of information dumped on you really fast. Um, so I guess like reading the three body problem for the first time, did you catch or did you have an inkling of what was happening? Because like I signed up for the series because like, oh, it's aliens, but like, well, where are the aliens? And it's just like this weird mystery.
I have to say, I don't know if you read the synopsis of the three body problem. I mean, every book has a synopsis on their cover, or rather, the back of the cover.
Hmm. I
That
didn't.
synopsis gives quite a lot away.
Oh, really?
It literally says an alien species sends two supercomputers to Earth.
Oh, really?
So imagine reading that synopsis before getting into the book, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what I did.
Wow.
So I always knew it was coming, and but it was still fascinating to read the details of the construction of the cell phone.
Hmm. Yeah, that's too bad. I remember hearing like um, people complaining about like the synopsis of the second book and like talking about like yeah, it gave away the entire plot of the first book basically. But when I read it, like I said, for the first time I experienced that book, I listened to the audiobook and I didn't read any synopsis or anything. It's just like, oh, recommended hard sci-fi, Through God a Problem, recommended by Barack Obama and everyone. So I was like, all right,
Yeah,
cool, sounds good. So I just like read it and I had no idea what's happening. And I figured like I was also surprised that like they stopped the three body game, kind of halfway through or 2/3 of the book. I figured that
mm,
was gonna be like throughout the whole book and maybe the whole series, right? Um, but yeah, like how the aliens show up, and like how that becomes like such a big deal, and like how when Jay being the commander, like that was like super surprising to me. I had
yeah,
but it clicked, it made sense as soon as they announced it, like oh right, of course, like she's still bitter about her father and all that stuff.
yes, yeah. That was a bombshell. Maybe it was. I mean, yeah, that was a bombshell, and of course, giving it away in the synopsis. Maybe it's intentional because maybe somehow the author knew that the start of the book was moving too slowly. And I would argue that even after reading the synopsis, it still has quite a few surprises in store. For example, Operation Guzheng using using the flying blade to
Right.
cut people in three.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like when Jay like killing her husband,
Oh
in
yeah,
the
that one.
in the
Yeah.
commissary, like that was also really surprising.
Mm,
How do you
yeah.
feel about Wang Miao kind of not showing up past the first book? Like that was surprising to me that like he meant I guess Dasher mentions him in passing like, in Dark Forest like once, like oh there's this
Yeah,
guy one time, like that's it, right? Like
he does. He does. I I didn't have any problem with it. I think I don't read book. I didn't read this book for the characters.
hmm,
All of the characters that Liu constructed are plot devices. They're just there. They're also quite. They also happen to be quite stereotypical.
yeah, yeah,
Now, what I find a little amusing is that, in fact, in the second book, Luo Ji and his girlfriend talks about literary creation, and his girlfriend says that the best literary authors they create characters and lose control of them, and the characters will just develop on the characters they construct will have a life of their own, which the creator can no longer control. So this is how it started out, how Luo Ji imagined his ideal lover,
yeah.
and so discovers that he can no longer control his construction anymore. What's amusing is that none of Liu's characters fit this criteria. You also have the sense you always have the sense that Liu actually has full control of his characters, which by his logic, by the logic of the character of Byron, the novelist in the book, are terrible characters. So that's not a problem. I mean, you just read for the ideas and you'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I worry about, like in the adaptation, is like, if they're gonna make a TV series out of this, like, and Wang Miao just like kind of fades away after the first season, assuming like it's one season per book, right? Like, how can
Mm.
they can't do that with a TV show, right? So, there was a discussion on Reddit, and I was like positing like, well, maybe like they're gonna combine Luo Ji and Wang Miao into one character, and maybe this Loa G like does like all the events in the three body problem. I mean, obviously, like as book readers, we know like they're not the same character, right? But I think for like a TV adaptation, they might do that just to make it not as jarring that like he just goes away or he just kind of fades away.
I don't think it's unprecedented for a TV show to completely dump a character after a season. Game of Thrones did it with with Ned Stark.
But I think
Um,
the difference here is like Ned Stark dies, right? Like
that's
here,
true.
yeah, like Wang Miao just like he just doesn't show up anymore. He doesn't die. He just like we just don't mention him anymore.
It will leave a weird feeling if they actually went about doing the exact same as the book.
Yeah,
I would only say that if they will combine Wang Miao and Luo Ji, then they would have to revise their stories quite a bit because
yeah,
it is not possible for these two to be the same person in the book world. One is an applied scientist who is very
right,
serious about his research. The other is sociologist
yeah,
who doesn't really care about academic research and just wants to live a life.
right. Just don't want to really do anything. Seems. Yeah, I just worry like so like my main concerns around the TV series is that yeah they're gonna well I have a couple like first like they're gonna kind of make it more westernized because like a lot of Western audiences aren't gonna understand a lot of the Chinese cultural things that are kind of that enhance the series that we've talked about. Second
Mm.
is around the Wang Miao specifically, um, and uh, and then third is like if are they gonna try to how are they gonna kind of present the high scientific concepts like how are they going to represent like the high order dimensionality of 11 dimensional protons into a more general audience like how can they represent that like Liu Cixin did it by writing it down but showing it and explaining it is a whole different matter I think.
Yeah, indeed. They might just this is very risky for them, but they might just pull off the same kind of thing as the 2001 Space Odyssey movie.
Hmm.
I don't know if you watched the movie.
I
It's
did.
quite it's
Yeah,
quite good.
it's my favorite movie.
Yeah, but you will admit. I mean, most people will admit that if you just watch the movie, you don't know what actually happened.
Right,
You don't know what actually happened, especially at the end.
right,
He gets into a hotel room and all of a sudden he becomes a star child,
right,
right? And you kind of have to go to Clark's book for a much clearer explanation. If they
yeah,
do the same thing with the three body problem, it could work, but I don't think they can pull that off with today's audience. Today's
yeah.
audience have much less patience than back then in the 70s.
Definitely. Yeah. Like 2001, the movie could never be made today. It's just like it had to have more explosions and whatever, all
Yeah.
the Marvel movies and whatever, like kind of ruined all, science fiction movies, I think.
Oh, yeah. One thing, if you don't mind, I'm wondering about something.
Sure.
You said that a lot of Chinese cultural elements might be westernized, but I would argue that a lot of Chinese culture, especially regarding ethics, is in fact embedded in the actions of the characters.
Hmm.
What I'm wondering then is, were there any parts during the book when you saw a character do something and you suddenly go, well, that's a little confusing why they would do that. It is not something that, let's say, an American would do. Were there spots like that when you were reading the series?
I can't think of anything offhand. I'm trying to think of anything that struck me. I think because the characters, like you said, they're more plot devices than actual like fully formed characters for the most part. Besides, I think I would say besides Ye Wenjie, she's the only one that has like more motivations. But I understood her motivations, right? Like I understood like why she did the things she did. Um, I think everything made sense. I think when I was speaking about like more westernization of concepts, is like all of these like Chinese names, right? Like that, or they'd
Ah,
be hard for American audiences to remember, like Yawenjie or even pronounce Yawenjie, right?
yeah.
And so I worry like they're going to call them like, oh, Jane Smith or whatever, right? Or like cast white
Mhm.
actors as those roles. Like hopefully, like Hollywood and learn their lesson around kind of cultural appropriation, around like some of the backlash of some of the other films that cast white actors as Asian, right?
Mhm.
So that's my worry is like they're gonna have studio executives saying we can't have so many Chinese characters in here. Like people aren't going to know how to pronounce like Wang Liao or Luo Qi or that kind of thing.
That's a possibility. I will leave it to them to worry about that.
Right.
I should make a point regarding Chinese ethics, that sort of thing. Well, not ethics, but really just a way of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you'll notice that first of all, there are several interesting mentions of totalitarian societies in the book.
Yeah.
The Trisolaris is totalitarian, and in the third book, there was a quote saying, "If humanity is lost in space, totalitarianism will take only 5 minutes," or
Mm.
something to that effect.
Right.
And then in the Singer chapter, it is revealed that in fact Singer doesn't cannot have any private thought of his own because the elder can just look for his thoughts
Right.
and read his thoughts. Um, it's an interesting take, and I'm not sure if the author is trying to say anything here. It seems also that the value of transparency is not very high in the book. Transparency is something that really is has there's a stark contrast on this issue between US and China. The
Mm.
US believes in transparency, whereas in politics and other things, the Chinese do not.
Mm.
And this is shown in the second book because you have four wall facers who whose very aim is not to give anything away.
Right.
At the same time, the Trisolarians who have transparent thoughts are defeated by scheme and strategy.
Right. Yeah. Their transparency is sort of their downfall, right? Like it's their Achilles heel by not being able to deceive and lie.
Yeah. So I believe that is definitely saying something about how differently the two cultures see this issue.
Mm. Yeah. It's definitely interesting. I didn't remember about the singer being able not being able to hide his thoughts, but that makes sense, right? Like the Trisolarans like also had the same thing. Like they had to share like they had no opportunity not to share their thoughts, right? Because like I guess like they're light or whatever, like had to like
Yeah,
communicate.
their communication organs. Yeah.
Is there anything you would that from the series like that you'd wish they had expanded more on, or anything that you kind of heard more about? Like I know there was like the with the Redemption of Time. I haven't read it, but
Yeah.
I heard that kind of expands a little bit on the story, like in a fan fiction way. But like I guess there anything any about the series that like was unsatisfying or things that you would like to be expanded on?
The ending felt a little rushed.
Hmm.
Um, that's about it, really. I mean, the construction of the mini universes at the end of the series were less convincing than the other concepts in the book in the series.
Yeah.
So maybe the whole story was getting too grand to control, and that's many readers on Chinese social media expressed similar thoughts. So I guess that's why people would write things like Redemption of Time.
Hmm.
But otherwise, I don't have any glaring holes in the book that I would like the author to fill. So
Yeah, I always wondered like why like Yun Ming and AA didn't just go in the pocket universe. Like he had it, right? Like why not just go in there and just wait for them to come out of the black domain?
I have no idea.
Like it feels a little bit unsatisfying that like Chang-Chi never meets up with Yan Ming afterwards, but
Oh, yeah.
that might be another thing that changed for the series, right? Like it, but it's more dramatic, that like it's always just like this series of like just misses, and like she's like just about to see him, and like all of a sudden like, oh, I'm stuck in a black domain for hundreds of
Yeah,
thousands of years or million, whatever it was, like millions of years, like stuck in that black domain.
yeah. That's it's quite heartbreaking if you think about it. But
Yeah, yeah, like the entire universe is destroyed, and like the one person that she wants to see, like she almost like gets there after traveling however many light years away.
hmm that's not a big problem. I think I wish the ending were more expanded. But I think in terms of giving an ultimate picture of the universe, it was sufficient.
Yeah, I always like the part where they talk about the what's it called, the returners, like the different factions, like and they also talk about, I wish I would saw a little bit more of the world, where she's on the planet Green, or was it planet Blue, or when she gets to the other planet, and they talk and they talk about like the how giving away coordinates of your system is like really taboo, and like that's really
Yeah.
dangerous, like just no one does it. um I guess I would have liked to see a little bit that part a little bit expanded, to like see like really what the other, outside of our solar system is like. Um,
Uh, yeah, yeah, okay. I agree with you. I think I would like to see more of the real kind of space battles as well, and how
yeah,
Trisolaris were able to survive all of this.
right, right, right. Yeah,
But look, the third book is already quite long, and
right.
they
Yeah, I mean it's ambitious enough, right? You like for it's like billions of years, so it's like how much can I put in there? And and the story is like he tries to focus in on Changxin and her her journey, right? And so she's kind of just hearing about these things, and maybe it's more interesting that way. Maybe if he actually showed like all these things, it wouldn't be as interesting. But the fact that like that stuff is out there, like you think about it, and that I think about it when I read that part, and like how what those other societies are like, and like really like there's all these space battles happening all the time. What does that look like? But maybe it's more interesting as like sort of an abstract concept, in your mind, and like from her perspective too, like she has to think about this stuff.
Yeah, and it's a favorite pastime of readers of
Right.
the series to construct some of these things from the teeny tiniest details in the later part of the book, of the third book. I mean,
Yeah.
so they would, and one of them was apparently consistent and credible enough to publish the Redemption of Time.
Did you read it?
I didn't,
Okay.
but they published it. It must
Yeah.
have been at least the most consistent of the fan fictions.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I've heard like I haven't heard like everything. I mean, it seems the reviews aren't like glowing, but they seem like it's okay. Like maybe it's just like the conceit that it's like not by Lewis Shin, right? But it's just a fan. It's not quote unquote canonical, right? So maybe that's why it has some more of the negative stereotype behind it. But yeah, that's at least my feeling as I see other people talk about it. But I also haven't read it.
I don't plan to read. I don't plan on reading it either. It's not very necessary in my view.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I This is an issue that did not occur to me until I read some of the reviews out there, and it's about the issue of misogynist
Hmm.
elements in the series. Apparently, people take offense with the construction of an ideal lover in the second book, and then actually finding a real person that fits the ideal.
Yeah.
And so that's the second book. The third book, it is arguably more blatant
Right.
with the negative comments about feminine qualities.
Hmm.
It didn't occur. This did not occur to me at all when I first read it. Well, maybe a little bit in the third book, but definitely I did not consider the second book to be anything that is misogynist. I wonder what your thoughts on that.
So I think it also didn't occur to me. Uh, I wouldn't. I would say it was weird. Like it seemed like creepy about Luoji, constructing a lover and like really fantasizing about her, and then like yeah, he finds some woman who just happens to, or I guess Dasher finds the woman who matches his description, and so I think the problem is like she doesn't have much agency at that point. Like she's not much of a character. She's just like his imaginary girlfriend at that point, and that it did strike me as weird, and like there's more it was more weird for G to do that than to be a really sexist thing. I think reading back on the series, like there are a couple like of those kind of creepy moments, where in the first book, like uh Wang Miao like is taking pictures of Yang Dong and like saying, "Oh, she's my perfect woman" or whatever. Like that kind of stuff there's like those kind of creepy elements there. But I have read those misogynist comments as well. I didn't get that from the third book at all. Like I think we talked about like she's kind of representing the goodness of humanity, and I love Ching Ching as a character. Like I always like she's one of the reasons like I like the third book the most. Is because like she has those good qualities to kind of balance against for like Wade, right? Like Wade has like the opposite of that, right? Like he would have like immediately pushed a button, even if like there wasn't any, I think he would immediately just destroy Tri-Slayers without any thought. So I like that kind of balance, but I think like as far as the misogyny, like I said, like it's more that kind of creepy elements that come here and there.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I I tend to believe that everyone, whatever gender they are, they would sometimes construct what an ideal person or an ideal lover is, and
Yeah,
everybody does that. I mean, women do it about men, men do it about women. Um, the
I think it's
reason I
not.
think the third book is more blatant is you see things like, you know, I think very pointed language at the feminization of men in the future, and
Yeah, that's
some
true.
some commander on the ship calls out, "Don't you know that there are no men in this society anymore?"
Hmm.
That's very suggestive of
Right.
of what feminine qualities are in the context of cosmic survival.
Right, right. Yeah. That's true. I didn't think about that part. Yeah, like how the old like the common era people like are always like kind of making fun of the later era people, like how they're all just like feminized and yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think like especially around like you said, like the people do construct you know the ideal mate in mind. I think like the issue there is that she shows up but she has no more agency than that. Like she's just like, oh, it's not, she's just this person who's like Loji's fantasy girl, right? She doesn't do
Mhm.
anything more to like have like more of a character, and I think that's the one knock on there.
Yeah, fair enough. And later on, she was taken away by the UN as a means to motivate Luozi.
Right. Yeah. It could have
So
been
again,
like she did that, or she made some kind of decision to do that. But yeah, she's just used as a tool, right? And as yeah, to make him, it's like a thing to make Luigi do something, not because she needs to do it, because she sees that like his plan's in danger because he's not doing anything.
yeah, fair enough. And I've also seen a theory where the UN actually trained a spy to fit every description that Luozi has.
Hmm.
And then, in fact, Zhuang Yan is some sort of agent
Hmm.
who
Interesting.
is who is who yeah who actually drives Luozi to do work. I don't think I caught any evidence towards that theory in the book, but I also did not catch any evidence against that
Yeah, I see.
theory.
I think that would make her character, a million times more interesting, right? Because like, sure, she shows up, but and it happens to be the perfect person that he describes, whatever. But it's for a reason, right? Like, like she's actually like a super competent spy, and was able to infiltrate him and kind of force him to start thinking about the plan. So yeah, that would be I like that theory that she is.
Yeah, so me too. I like it a lot. Again, there's no evidence supporting this, and there's no evidence against this. It's completely up to the reader.
Maybe it would have been too much, like because the other wall facer, his wife, it becomes his wall breaker. So maybe it's like that'd be too
Uh,
similar.
yeah, yeah, maybe. Oh, just as an aside regarding Frederick Tyler, back onto that point,
Hmm.
they did, I think, omit a tiny segment in the English version. I went back and verified this. So it is a snippet of very mild political commentary where the wall breaker of Tyler says to him that you're not a very qualified wall facer because your plan is foolhardy and lacks scheming and twist and deception. The political commentary comes in where the wall breaker says that is because inherently you, as a former US Secretary of State, have fallen into the habit of making strategic decisions while possessing the most advanced technology of mankind. And the US has possessed the most advanced technology on Earth since probably the 60s or the
Mm,
50s.
right.
And that's true, right? So but his argument here is that because the US has always made decisions from a position of technological strength, therefore he is not a qualified warfacer when we face an alien civilization that is vastly more technologically advanced than us.
Mm, yeah.
Which, which to me made logical sense. I'm not sure why they omitted this snippet in the English version. Maybe it wouldn't be popular with the US audience. But I mean, it's sort of true. The U.S. has the strongest military or other technologies on the planet right
Mm.
now, and they have been for decades. But
Yeah,
anyway,
it could also be like yeah, like because like we have like I think we have an arrogance to us, as Americans that we have like the best technology and like we'll be able to solve any problems. Um, and so maybe that's why it wouldn't be. And I think humanity has that same problem later on when the droplet attack is like, oh yeah, no problem, we can take out 200 years. We would advance so much that we can take out one little droplet. So,
maybe, but yeah, they so just for the sake of completeness, that is another part
hmm.
that they omitted in the English translation.
Well, I just want to say thank you very much. I've really appreciated our talk here. Is there anything that you'd like to find people online or like how people can communicate with you?
Yeah, you can email me or chat to me via Reddit.
Thank you very much, Frank, for your time. I appreciate all your insights and discussion. It's been really fun. If you'd like to participate in the series, please leave me a comment at rehydrate@fastmail.com or on Twitter at rehydratepod, or you can find us on the Three Body Reddit. Again, thank you very much, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.